Welcome to another episode of Top Lines and Tales and to a new series called Characters in Livestock, where over the next few months we'll be talking to some of the main movers and shakers and those with a great story to tell in and amongst our industry. We welcome this week Willie Thompson from Turriff and Jill Hunter, beef and sheep nutritionist at Harborough. Willie, welcome to the podcast, and you, Jill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jill, I gather Willie has been highly instrumental in pretty much all of your nutritional decisions, or many of your nutritional decisions there at Harborough. And obviously nutrition is something you take very, very seriously. And yourself, I guess, is possibly, Willie, is somebody that you've learnt from, Jill.
Absolutely. I remember the first time actually that I met Willie and I heard him talking about nutrition, and I just thought, absolutely, that's what we want to be. And if you could ever learn half of what Willie knew, you would be a good nutritionist. Okay. So Willie, I guess, Willie joined Harborough, and Willie can correct me, in 1984. And I think since 85, there you are, I was giving you an extra year. And since then, I guess Willie's been fundamental in instilling the ethos that science and innovation should really back up everything that we do on the nutrition and advice side on Harborough.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And Willie, that's a long service medal you're getting there, Jill. You'd be it'll be before your day, I'd say.
A little, yeah.
And Willie, can you tell our listeners on Top Lines and Tales a little bit about your earlier life and your background, please? I believe you farmed at Woodnuke with Highland cattle originally. Is that right?
Absolutely. But first of all, can I just say that the introduction from Jill was obviously completely inappropriate, because I've kind of muddled along all through my career and just tried to do a reasonable enough job, but definitely nothing like she said anyway. So, yeah, I've been lucky through the days, and I had a cracking upbringing at Woodnuke. My dad is a great farmer, great stockman, loved his Highland cattle, and I suppose I was really interested in the stock side, so that's what I've pursued all through my days.
Is that right? Woodnuke would be at Barhead, is it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Barhead down in Glasgow, yep.
Okay. And with the Highland cattle, would they be at the forefront of the breed back then and out there showing them and breeding at a high level?
Well, it's quite funny. My grandpa, TBL Thomson, he started the fold, I think it was about 1954 or something like that. And when my dad came to take over the farm, then I think there was about 60 Highland cows there. Right. And he was looking at these cows with the small calves and thinking he was going to upgrade them to proper cows, we'll call it. And he went to look at the thing, and of course a standard cow was about 600 pounds, and a Highlander was probably nearer 200 pounds. So he could have gone from 60 cows to 20. So at that point, we were friendly with a great guy, Jimmy Forbes at Castle Grant, and Jimmy was breeding crossbred Charolais Angus bulls. So we actually started crossing the Highlanders with the Charolais Angus bull. Okay. And the results were fantastic. So we ended up getting real good commercial calves. Used to top the sale at Paisley Market when it was there. Mm-hmm. And from then on, I think that really influenced my dad's breeding. And yeah, he grew to really love the Highlanders, loved the Highland society, but he loved the Highlanders for their ability to be outwintered, low levels of input, but if you put the right bull on them, then you could actually get a good cross calf out of them for little feeding cost.
Certainly, it's a breed that we've looked at very closely on Top Lines and Tales, but that's the first time I've heard a hybrid, or should I say a crossbred bull being used on the Highlanders. But that sounds like a great cross of Charolais, cross Angus. And would that be some fairly marginal land there, hill land that you were talking at Woodnuke?
Yeah, it's not particularly high. I think it's about 600 feet, but it's fairly kind of wet and shallow soils, and we don't have a lot of shed space. There's a lot more now, but certainly in those days, everything was outwintered, all the time. And it's just a very simple system, and actually probably influenced a lot of the stuff I did at Harborough, just because was really trying to maximise the use of forage on that farm.
Sure. Because the lower the level of the soil, then of course the more they require additional nutrition. And Willie, you'd go on to study there. Where would you go on and to learn your early trade?
I never wanted to do anything other than go back to the farm, and I really kind of mucked about at school, had a great time, and didn't do particularly well in my hires. And I was going to go to the college at Auchincruth. And after I got my 3 C's in my hires, I went down for an interview thinking I would easily get in. And they rejected me. And the guy says, no, you want to go back to school and then try and get to university. Okay. So I did that, and it was a bit of a panic to try and actually pull my socks up. And eventually I got into Aberdeen. And it was only after I left that I found out that my dad actually knew the guy that did the interview pretty well, and had told him that there was no way I was coming back to the farm, and I had to go and get an education someplace else. So, so that was that. But no, I had farmer's lung when I was in the farm, so I couldn't actually go back to the farm. Okay. So that's why I had to go and do something else.
But Aberdeen, of course, a great grounding, and you'd be in good company there, up there with a lot of other nutritionists, I guess, right back to your university days, would you?
Well, I think first thing was the bad company of the fellow students. I mean, we probably had one of the wildest years that had been for a long time, and we've got some badges of honour for being the first students to be flung off an agri field trip and all sorts. And we still the kind of core of the troublemakers still got on hell of a well and chat quite a lot. But I mean, at that time, the university, it wasn't actually just the university that you went to. It was the School of Agriculture. Okay. And you basically had everything from the University of Aberdeen, but you had the NOSCA, or the SAC as it would be. You had the Rowett, you had the Macaulay. Everything was sort of rolled into this School of Agriculture system. Mm-hmm. And that meant that we had guys who were, really brilliant on farm, like guys like Mike Kay, but at the same time you had some of the best fundamental science lecturers from the Rowett, like Sir Bob Osgoff and John Robertson, and you had those guys teaching us.
Yeah, okay, excellent. So you kind of fell into that, and you got the right people there around you, and you're quite welcome to name and shame some of the rogues that you were there at university with. Is anybody that we should talk about?
I would say probably the worst behaved was a guy called Andy Robertson, but he got led astray, and I think one of your pedigree guys will know him would be George McFadgen, down in Perth, and he was there at the same time. He wasn't in our class there, but gosh, some of the fun they used to have was pretty good.
Big George McFadgen would lead anybody astray. I can be sure on that one.
Well, I think if you know it was George is the kind of one of the leaders of the merriment, then fine, you're in for trouble.
Absolutely agree. And George, if you're listening there, hello. But I think everybody will agree with that statement there, Willie. And obviously you stayed in and around Aberdeen, and then just to bring us up to date, where is home to you now? You're Turriff, is that right?
Yeah. No, it was my supervisor, and probably the guy who was most instrumental in, I suppose, put me in a reasonable track was a guy, Peter English. And Peter English was world famous for his work on pigs, but he was also a bit of a wild character himself. And Peter, he came in one day and said, why is nobody applying for this job at Harborough? And of course, we'd never heard of it, and I'd never heard of Harborough. So we applied, and I got the job, and that was it. So I went to this place, Turriff, for a company called Harborough that I'd never heard of either before, and probably couldn't ever get another job after that. So that was me stayed for a long time. And that's brilliant.
For our overseas listener, of course, Turriff would be a hotbed of pedigree breeders in the cattle and the sheep world, particularly in the Suffolk sheep world as well. There'd be some of the greatest beasts in the UK would have come out of that district there. So you'd be in amongst some good guys around that area, and I guess that would be handy for making a few contacts too.
It was brilliant, and honestly, I've been lucky through my whole days, if you like, by the experiences you gain from from brilliant people. But yeah, Harborough is, was and is a brilliant company, and really focused on trying to kind of work with the best guys and sort of take them on, if you like. And that means that you're working with top farmers all the time, and you've got that challenge that you've got to actually add something. Yeah. And that was what we always tried to do, whether it was the mayors, or, they're just these guys at the top of the tree. But it's quite funny because if you look at, for instance, the mayors in Turriff, they really used John Robertson, probably as much as Harborough did. Yeah. And, that was the Route Institute at that time, having a real influence, not just on the kind of farmers, but also the advisors.
Okay, and John Robertson is somebody that we have spoke to on this programme before, and an incredible man and an incredible mind as well, and a very humble man too. And you would have direct association with John then from when you started at Harborough, did you?
Yeah, and also... with other guys there like Bob Orskoff, Bob, who John would rave about in terms of his work in protein nutrition. He was the guy that came out with this split of protein for sort of rumen-active protein and then undegradable protein going into the intestine. But I went through it for a project once when I was at university and chatting away to this mad Dane, and it turned out that during the war he'd been evacuated from Denmark out to not far away from our farm, and he was in the same young farmers as my mum and dad. So I got on great with Bob. So I mean, guys, John and Bob were probably two of my real core advisors, if you like, on everything to do with nutrition.
Another name that I've got here is Nick Johnson as well. Would he be another man that would be influential?
Well, absolutely. That was later than that. But yeah, guys like Nick Johnson at Glasgow Vet School. I went down to see him to show him some of the stuff we were doing with technology and data, and we just hit it off straight away. But that's a guy that's done a huge amount of good for the industry, and he has. We went to him with problems like the first one was cryptosporidium, and we had massive problems with crypto and sucklers at that time. And he just said, right, give me £5,000 so that I've got something to show the guys at university, and we'll do a bit of a study. So that was it. He did a huge amount of work and really helped us with the health side. Okay. And from then on, we've gone brilliantly. And
going back to the early days, fish meal would be an area probably where you would start, certainly with the protein. I mean, it was obviously all the rage going back. We fed a lot of pigs, and it was fish meal was everything. And of course, that's been phased out over the years. But that's something that you'd be early involved with.
Yeah, and it probably showed us a lot as well about some of the things like the politics that were on the go at the time, because if you actually look at fish meal as a source of nutrients for ruminants, then yeah, it's almost unbeatable. Same on the pig side. I mean, it's a fantastic source for pigs, but with pigs you can probably replace fish meal by using synthetic amino acids. But in ruminants, because of the ability for the fish meal to bypass the rumen and be digested in the intestine, then you really struggle to get that through other sources. And when fish meal was banned, we led quite a big fight to try and get it reinstated for particular uses. But it was disappointing we didn't get any help from the likes of Squabble at the time or SAC.
And it would be a huge challenge, wouldn't it, to replace that, as you said, with other forms of protein?
Oh, it's virtually impossible because they don't give the breadth of amino acids through into the intestine that fish meal would give. But it's banned, and that's it. But it was a great raw material, and to be honest, probably should still be available. Because the stuff they were using was a byproduct from human fish fillets, if you like. So it wasn't harvesting up sand eels.
Okay. Okay, and you mentioned there some of the key farmers round about that area, and obviously the mares at Muresk were top of the game in the sheep world and in the dairy world. Is there a few others that you can tell us about that you sort of got involved with in the area there that the bows top of the tree?
Yeah, there's too many to mention. I suppose we've got a brilliant sales team, and most of the sales guys would be handling their own customers, and I would tend to get brought in my role for guys who either had issues or there was some other kind of challenge. So I would have probably gone a lot further afield than say just round about this Turriff area. But no, some of my real favourites were guys like Sandy Innes up at Moyness on the cattle side. He was brilliant to deal with because he was such a difficult character, but yet I actually got on brilliantly with him, and I really enjoyed my time with Sandy. But likes of Andrew Reid, who's now obviously doing his own thing. Andrew was a young stockman there, so I built up a great relationship with likes of Andrew, and we did a lot of good things there. Talking of Sandy and not going on to other folk yet, but one of the best things that I ever did in my time was a promotion that we did in the pedigree side for cattle with a company, Pfizer. And that was this Win a Date with Linda promotion that we did. And that was a Charolais heifer that I bought from Sandy, and we auctioned that off to all the farmers that bought this Pfizer product called Staffag.
And were you involved in that? Because that was an ingenious bit of marketing, I have to say.
It was. I was fully involved with it because we were sitting there, and the guy was trying to sell us the idea of moving on to the Staffag, and he just couldn't get any company to take it on because it was towards the end of the days with Growth Motors. And I said to him, right, you give us your entire budget, and we'll do a promotion that will put you on the map. And he did. And we had the most fun that you could possibly imagine with this Charolais heifer, which I was incredibly fortunate. I remember going into the shed, and there was Sandy, and there was Andrew there, and there was, I don't know how many, we'll just say there was about 50 heifers in there, and they said, right, take your pick. And I thought, oh no, what the hell am I going to do here?
Put you on the spot.
So I got all these unwashed, unclipped heifers to have a look at. So I picked Linda, and I was really fortunate down to Ayr Show, and we got champion at Ayr Show, and we beat a couple of notables down there. And from then on, that was it. She was a champion heifer, and we went to the Highland Show and the Royal Show and various other shows, and it was great fun. Met so many good people.
Did you bring her out, Willie, or did you get Andrew to do that job?
No, Andrew did it, and he did a brilliant job. And of course, Sandy is so particular that it was just done perfectly. You couldn't have had it done any better. So what we did is we turned up with our kist, which was a beautiful kist full of glaive, and we basically stood there and chatted to every farmer from round about the country that came to see this heifer. Derek Johnson had a glaive with each of them, and I think the Highland Show, I think Derek collapsed in beside the beast, and the two of them were just lying there quite happy together. So that was brilliant.
Excellent.
We also had a great fun down at the Royal Show, where again the similar behaviour ended up. But we ended up getting invited into one of the tents, which was having a party as we were kind of heading away, and we had Peter Kenyon and Graham Baxter and Ian Menny and myself, Colin Booth, I think, and these guys came out and they saw us coming along and they said, "Are you guys the band?" And we said, "Yeah." So they dragged us in, and we said, "We're just waiting for the equipment." So we get given more and more drink, waiting for all this equipment that didn't arrive to do a bit of a runner. So yeah, we had an amazing time. It's great fun.
Great fun. Who eventually got the heifer? Willie, can you remember?
Yeah, Jimmy Green up at Korsky. Again, just you maybe know them from the pig side, but you've got Ian Green obviously running the farm now, but fantastic, customers of Harborough, but just great people as well. And we were absolutely delighted when they won it. So it was great.
Excellent. What a great promotion. And what year was that? Can you remember? I do remember it myself, but it would be late 90s, would it?
It was late 90s. If I had to guess, I would say 97. Okay. But honestly, it's just a pure guess. I couldn't tell you.
I'm sure a lot of other people listening to this will remember it well as well. And let's move on to some of the product development that you did do in amongst Harborough there. Products like Maximon and Rumitech. And I mean, these are things that you were personally involved with the development of.
Yeah. I mean, when you're dealing with farmers that are, at the edge of their game, if you like, they really are leading the thing. You're always experiencing the challenges that they experience, and it's brilliant because it allows you to try to find solutions for the problems they've got. Yeah. And because we've always kept this link with science, we've always tried to base it obviously on scientific principles, but also then get it tested out properly on farms. So yeah, we've been, really lucky with our ability to sort of play about with stuff on, really top farms and then find out if things are working or not. So yeah, we've done some good stuff that way.
And Jill, I'll bring you in there. So Maximum and Rumitech would be the mainstay of Harborough, wouldn't they? So you're very grateful to this research.
Absolutely, yeah. That would be our two main products that we would focus on just now. And yeah, the early development work that went into that and the work to develop Rumitech into where it is now. Just an interesting story about Rumitech. It is Carbon Trust approved to reduce methane, and when we were presenting that to Scottish Government one day, they were saying to us, "Oh, you've had this product." I mean, maybe Willie can explain a little bit about where it came from, but so you've had this product in the market for 10 years. Why have you only just got it Carbon Trust approved? And I guess the answer to that was really because we didn't know about the Carbon Trust. It was initially brought in to help farmers improve performance and profitability. It wasn't anything to do with the ticking these boxes at the time. So
you just happened on that one purely by accident, Willie. I'm sure you won't tell me that.
No, it wasn't. I suppose it was by accident in some ways, but no, it's. I was invited out to meet some people out in Geneva who were doing some work in this area, and they gave some information that sounded really interesting. Now, there's so many things that sound interesting and sound good and just don't work that you go, that's fine. The only way you can do it is go and test it in an animal. Mm-hmm. So I heard this stuff and I thought, yep, that sounds okay. We'll take it back and we'll see if it works. Go and ask some cows and see what happens. So we actually took it out to Thomson Wilson's place out at Auchnagat, and his son Michael was he was on the farm, just more or less kind of back in and was getting involved and was dead keen in doing some trials. So we put in the Rumitech to some finishing cattle to go and see what happened. I think about 3 or 4 weeks later on, I met Michael and he was at the Curling Bonspiel, and I said, well, how's it going? He says, well, it's definitely doing something. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, the cattle are eating less. Well, okay. And he was making up 7-ton batches of feed, mm-hmm. and he was on his third batch of feed for the control animals, and the other ones hadn't even got anywhere near finishing their second batch. So you're thinking, oh my goodness, and it was a bit of a worry, because if it was put them off the feed, then that could have obviously reduced the performance. But when the results came out, the performance was every bit as good as the control, but they'd eaten, and I think it was something like 15% less feed for the same gain. And that was what really got us interested in it. The methane thing is great, right? It's fine. And everybody wants to go on to the buzzwords of methane. But actually what methane is just surplus energy that's been expelled from the animal. So if you can retain that energy in the animal, you've got less methane, which is good from a climate point of view, you can say. But the most important thing is that your feed conversion's much better. Yeah. And that is what we've found with the Rumitech all the time, is that you can get basically more retained energy from your feed. So
straight onto the bottom.
Great, absolutely great stuff.
Straight onto the bottom line by the sound of it. Yeah.
Well, it is, and this is something that costs pennies, and yet you'll get a tenfold return to your investment from putting it in. But you've also got other aspects of it, because it seems to improve the grading as well, because the partitioning of the nutrients goes less towards fat.
Okay. Excellent. Well, you're selling it to me, certainly. And you're going back. You're saying you're traveling there. You travelled to Geneva, but I gather you've travelled quite a bit there. You've been in America and Asia, various places there. Have you been lucky on the travel front?
Yeah, no, I've been really lucky. I've seen a lot of different countries, but most importantly, I've seen some fantastic systems and producers. We did a lot of stuff out in America. Chris Baxter and I would have gone and set up some business out there for a product called BioSuper, which is a powder disinfectant that we were selling, which is a cracking product. But we got 5 at the top 10 pig producers using it. But yeah, I've seen guys all over the world, and you see some definitely different sites. So been lucky with that.
Were you involved in some of the big feedlots there? We've chatted to one or two of the guys in the big feedlots out in Nebraska. Have you come across some of those outfits? Oh,
yeah. We used to take dairy trips every year out. Well, not every year. Did a few of them. Went to the States. Was one of their dairy guys, Ian Murray, and went to California once and went to the Harris Ranch. Yeah. And it's something like a square mile of cattle. And you stand up there and there's 120,000 cattle down below you, and it's incredible. Their systems, they're awesome, but the cattle are completely different. You've got hormones going in, the whole system's different, but it's not necessarily comparable. But yeah, we've learned a lot from people like that.
Certainly, we've seen studying the Dar Ranch earlier on in a series there, and these guys bringing in something like 300,000 tons of corn in a 3-week period. And it's just mind-boggling numbers, aren't they?
Well, exactly. And you mentioned Maximon earlier on, but when you look at the learnings that we've had from like the Maximon, then there's huge potential for these guys to be Maximon treating materials out there because of what it does to reduce acidosis.
Okay. And as far as Asia is concerned, obviously the big markets now and things coming from China and the Far East there, are they a different system again out in Asia than would be used to, or than the Americans would be used to, or they would be used to?
Just completely different. They've got feedlots, and they've a lot of European and American type systems that they've adopted, but the culture's completely different. So, I've done quite a bit of stuff on pigs. I also had a phenomenal experience chatting to go and do a presentation to some guys from Inner Mongolia on sheep production. Okay. And I'd seen on Ewan McGregor's Long Way Around these nomadic sheep farmers in Inner Mongolia wandering about with their sheep and producing the odd lamb sort of thing. When I went and actually started chatting to them and asking them questions about, when do you lamb? And they said, well, we, for quite a bit of the system, we've got twice a year lambing. Mm-hmm. And you're going, right, okay. Now, we used to have that over here, but it's all gone. And I said, right, okay, so these kind of nomadic sheep that are wandering about there producing lambs maybe twice a year, what kind of lambing percentage are you getting? And I'm expecting about 10 or 20 or something. And they said, well, the target's 200. Wow. And you're going, wow. Okay.
Twice a year.
So, twice a year. And then you dig down into the information and you start finding out about their dead weights, and you find that the target dead weight is 25 kilos.
Wow. Okay.
Now, okay, not every ewe is lambing twice a year, not every ewe is producing 2 lambs, and not every lamb's 25 kilos, but they've got a target output and a potential output of 100 kilos per ewe. Yeah. Right? And if you look, and that's for Inner Mongolian sheep, and if you look at what our target output is over here, and you possibly look at the potential that's there within the ewe to increase that, that's where you probably see that there's still room to challenge the science in terms of what we're doing.
Improve the profitability, yeah, of course. And the New Zealand, of course, the same. New Zealand would all be easy care, but I mean, they'd be nowhere near those numbers, would they?
Nowhere near the numbers. No, I was out in New Zealand a couple of years ago, and I was actually with one of the top sheep producers there, and he was laughing because he says, I'm the best sheep farmer in New Zealand, and I think I'm the best in the world, sort of thing. And he had actually come over to UK, and he'd gone to see some of the flocks here, Suffolks and things, and he said, I went there, and he says, his growth rates for all his lambs are 235 or 265 grams a day on average for everything. But he came out here and he's hearing these guys saying, I'm getting 400 grams, and he's going, that's rubbish, absolutely rubbish. Not even the best of us are doing that. And then he saw one farm and then another farm, and he saw the potential of some of the sheep over here, and he went, wow, and that's the problem I think that we've got, is that we've got some fantastic potential here, but it's probably not getting applied all the way through the whole system as a system approach. And I think that's one of the areas there that the industry probably does need to get better at looking at what potential is, and then looking at what the reality is, and then understanding what is causing the disparity, if you like, between potential and actual performance. Okay,
that's highly interesting, and to see that we've still got a long way to go. But of course, a lot of this would be, and the New Zealand are on easy care, and of course, I suppose the labour charges and that sort of things. It'll be about lower input costs, and maybe some of that would come into it, or can this still be done with
No. The quality of the farming for these top guys out there is absolutely first class. So although they purchase less concentrates, I was out there, I've been out a couple of times, but I was out there because they were adopting Maximon, because they realised they had to top up the feeding to actually get more concentrates in at particular times. So their grass management is very intense. So the top guys would spend a lot of a lot more focus on maximising grass output than we do, but they then quite often allow that to fall away during the winter. So one of the things I really enjoyed doing was going to the Greenhouse Gas Research Centre in Australia, and we were actually looking at that point at barley bulls. And they were talking about all the technology they've got, and it's fantastic to monitor methane. But when you go around their cattle, their barley bulls were actually outside standing in fodder bait and during the winter. And it was actually taking them 3 years to go away.
Really?
So, yeah, if you look at the data from the UK, we had bulls which are, ready at 11 months rather than even the minimum 12. And I think that's part of the kind of conundrum with New Zealand. They're brilliant at grass management. They get brilliant sheep results, but then quite often they kind of then just don't feed at times when the grass isn't there, and then they let the progress of hard disappear, and then they end up with, for instance, these black and white bulls taking 3 years to go away.
Right.
So we've all got lots to learn.
That's something I can relate to. When I left school on the farm, we had 500 barley bulls all inside, and you're right, the youngest ones go away at 9.5, 10 months. The first ones would be away. So, yes, absolutely. 3 years. 3 years, it didn't sound like it would be overly profitable if they're tucking into the barley trough through that full length of time anyway. And anywhere else we want to chat about this, where you've been travelling there?
Well, Norway has been... It's a great place for Harborough, and it's a great place. They've really adopted Maximon and Rumitech early on. And one of the best things, though, I think about Norway is just when you go and see the Norwegians and you see the focus on science in their farming, and you see the focus on data to back up all the decisions. You mentioned earlier, Professor Nick Johnson. Well, Nick had gone over to do a bit of work over there, and he went to the dairy cooperative called Tine, and they basically would control about 80%, I think it is, of the dairy market in Norway. And they were doing some work with the university on Maximon, which was showing fantastic results in terms of improved efficiency and rumen health. Mm-hmm. And they were chatting away about the fact it was getting used on farm and the fact that they had all the farm data. And they said, well, can you tell me exactly, what difference it's making to the farmers? And they said, yeah. And within a few clicks on the computer, they could pull out all the farms in Norway that were using Maximon and compare them to all the farms that weren't using Maximon.
Okay, yeah. What a tool. What a marketing tool.
Absolutely. And he could see that, the ones that were using Maximon, there were something like 1,000 or whatever else litres more milk per cow. Mm-hmm. The ones that weren't using Maximon. Yeah. Now, that's not a fair comparison. It's not it's not a trial. It's nothing. But what it was showing you is that Norwegians there, they have the systems in place that allow them to find facts about products. Mm. And when they find the facts about the products, then they can actually make decisions about whether they're strategically right or wrong, as opposed to the UK, which used to be, if you go back to the 80s, all the work was getting done, like, say, Noska, Mike Kay and stuff. He would have been doing all his studies with the growth motors with the top farmers here and then publishing all the results independently, if you like. So everybody would know that things were working or not working. Now, you look at the quality of the science that's going on and you go, yeah, really, really good fundamental science, but not a lot of really good, relevant, practical science going on here.
Okay. Information is there, but maybe not being used. Would that be right?
Absolutely.
And it's fascinating that is of your travels. We go back to your early days. Who would have been the mentors in the past that you would have been looking up to learn from when you got started? Are there names going back the way into the sort of 60s and 70s where all this started?
I think this reference to 60s and 70s is just, a wee bit early. I mean, I was only born in the 60s.
I mean, there'd be people that would be older than you, but I mean that they would have started this in the same way that Bakewell and going back the way, sort of innovators is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, no. When I started with Harborough there, I suppose the key was that Harborough had some incredibly good guys in the field and within the company who were working with these, incredibly top farmers. So when you mentioned pigs earlier on, but guys like the Masses, for instance, at Blellock, they had a pig herd as well as the Anguses and the Charolais. So they were, very, very big customers of Harborough's, and that was the kind of level of customer that you had to start working with there. So we would have had a guy, Davy Malcolm, who was our pig specialist, would have been working away there. Peter Kenyon, who obviously was one of the kind of key founders of Harborough, he was doing a lot of the technical stuff when I arrived. And these, Graham Baxter would have been involved with the account. So those are the kind of guys that when you start working in teams like that, then you can't help but realise that, you've got to aspire to be as good as these guys, but you've also got to try and do a pretty good job, otherwise the customer's just going to kick you out.
Sure, you're going backwards, yeah. And we've had a lot of your time, and very fascinating it's been. Willie, can you give us a little bit of advice, maybe for the younger people out there building their career within agriculture and within the technical side of it as well? Is there openings for, in the same way that you had to go into the business, still furthering this technical advance?
There's massive openings, because if anything, a lot of the application of the science in the UK has regressed from where it was in the 80s. I was down in Edinburgh before the World Angus Forum, and I met up in the pub some Australians, and I was just chatting away about what they're doing and how they'd got on going around all the UK Angus herds, and they said, it was a bit like going around an antique shop. He said, because we came over here and we're looking to buy some genetics, but he says, no, there's nothing we've seen. And I was like, why not? He says, we're so far down the line of genomics now. He said, we've got our genomic reference herd with, I can't remember, 1,000 or 1,300 cows in the genomic reference herd. And he said, all our decisions are made on data. Now, if you were young and you're coming into the agriculture here, there's massive opportunities to use the data from real live production systems to go and feed into decision making on the genetic side, for instance. I mean, we work with EBVs here, and these estimated breeding values are exactly that. They're estimated. And yet there's not really been any real progress to try to capture actual breeding values using all the new sensors and technologies that are on the go. So I would say the change in technology and data analytics that are on the go are going to transform production. And I think if you look at, say, the sheep industry, the use of the auto-sort, auto-weigh equipment, all of a sudden now you've got a chance to have side-by-side trials within the same field with virtually no work whatsoever. A computer will tell you, the difference between treatment A and treatment B if you give them, a bolus or different warming regimes or whatever. And the chance now to get really good data is probably the most exciting thing that's on the go now.
Okay, no, I absolutely get that. And the more data we get, of course, EBVs came in originally and it was estimated because there wasn't that data there. But, a lot's gone on since the beginning of EBVs in sort of 30 years or so. As you said, there's a lot of real data out there. And that's, and would there be openings for youngsters to come through the feeding business? And is there a lot more, you think there's more development to be done on the feeding side?
There's so much more, because as soon as you start looking at any form of data, you then start looking at the spread of performance. And as soon as you see the spread of performance, you realise that there's a huge failure rate. And as soon as you understand that there's a huge failure rate within the system, then you've got to really challenge yourself as to why that is. And, I don't want to harp on about commercial products, but one of the best results that we did on Maximon showed that the performance was, I think it was like 1.9 kilos a day on Maximon compared to 1.6 kilos a day on Propcorn. And you go, fantastic, that's great. Obviously, Maximon's better, right? But when you actually looked at the data, the top performing cattle on the Maximon just performed the same as the top performing cattle on the Propcorn.
Okay.
But it was the failure rate on the Propcorn that was much greater.
Sure.
Than the failure rate on the Maximon. And from that, you could see that it was actually what the Maximon was doing with the cattle that were affected by acidosis or were prone to acidosis. That was what was causing the problem. So it's understanding that, looking at the data and understanding where the gaps are. And that's why, there's huge opportunities for people to apply really good science, but they've got to be, they can't just, wander in and say, these are nice beasts and, you'll need to feed them a wee bit more or something. You've really got to understand the data and understand the systems.
Willie and I, us slightly older guys, are talking about the youngsters, and of course we have not forgotten the youngster that's on this call. That is Jill there, who's I won't say starting out in the industry. She's been there a while, and obviously Willie's talking great sense here, Jill. But is this what you're focusing on yourselves and on by trying to use more real-time data?
Yeah, absolutely, Andy. I guess data now is so important, and we would try in most situations, as Willie says, not just to go in and your beasts are looking good today. It does have to be driven by data. We've got so much technology at our fingertips, and sometimes we can get a little bit lost in it. Sometimes there could be too much data. So I guess it's just using what we have, making sure that we can drill down into the bits that are important, and keep track and keep monitoring things, making sure it's live and real time.
Can I just add to that there, though, Jill? Because you're involved now in some, really cutting edge stuff on the beef side, where you're looking at 3-dimensional imaging of cattle that are alive to predict the yield when they're slaughtered, and also to be monitoring the growth rate, multiple times in a day. And all that technology that you're working with there is going to give you a completely different understanding of production and output.
Absolutely, yeah. And it does mean that our team on the ground do need to be next level as well. They need to understand what that means for the farmers and being able to explain that and get the best out of it too. So we do see a change in the type of person that would be working for likes of Harbour for feed businesses now. They really need to understand all of that.
A lot more tech savvy, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
But there has to be middle ground too, doesn't it? There's still a farmer who can be bamboozled a little bit by science. You have to have a middle ground, and that takes a particular type of person to be both technical and amiable to the farmers, I guess. They're quite hard to find, those people.
To be honest, they are hard to find, right? But it's not as hard as you think, because if you've got a real interest, and if I just use Jill here as a great example, if you've got someone who's incredibly clever, but got a real passion for the industry and a real interest in their subject area, right, then that person will learn the science and learn from the experiments. And then it's a pleasure to actually go and try and translate that into everyday language just for normal situations. I mean, one of the things that makes me most proud is when you see folk like, Davy Mackenzie, who would never have grown up having a massive interest in science. But when you see him on a farm drawing on dusty bags, pictures of Rubens connected to cecums and showing where, hindgut fermentation comes from. And, it's brilliant, because that's the appliance of science. And that you've always got to remember that. But that's where we're incredibly lucky, to be honest, having people like Jill actually doing the job.
Certainly. Well, that couldn't be a better reference for you there, Jill. I think I admire you in the job that you're doing, and David as well. And I do have to thank Harborough for being involved and sponsoring the Top Lines and Tail podcast. And I hope that a lot of our listeners out there have found this extremely interesting. And Willie, is there anything else we would like to add to that before we wrap this one up?
If you wanted anything that was slightly controversial, you would be able to get Jill to comment on the fact that now she's getting data on yields of cattle before they're even slaughtered, how that will impact on EBVs for eye muscle size, which have probably been about the biggest disaster for the industry, because it's meant that the steak size is too big, and you're ending up having to have smaller or less output from the sucker herd because you're slaughtering them earlier. So I think that's the type of thing, Jill, where going forward, that's the connection we need, and maybe you should be saying something about that, the connection from the breeder, if you like, and the pedigree guy right the way through to the abattoir, because that's something that hasn't happened. You've had breeding to win shows in UK, right? If you look at the rest of the world, it's on genomics, but genomics are certainly not the panacea. But if you can link, the real genetic information through to the actual yields in the abattoir, then you start really understanding the potential of what you can breed.
I think it is a real challenge, and I guess what we have to do is to make sure that the customers that we're dealing with are profitable for what they're doing. And we would see, I guess the pandemic actually has been really good to encourage online sales, on-farm sales, where there have been more commercial type animals being sold farm to farm, whereas
there certainly are more people inclined now to buy on data and buy online, and we've chatted to a few of those.
We certainly have customers who are recording individual animal intakes through individual feed bunkers. A great example is Colin Davidson at Scale, who's inputted that and off his own back, and really helped. I mean, it's helped me to understand more about nutrition, and it's helped him to understand more about his bulls and his breeding program.
Yes, certainly. Again, a high-profile albeit to do that, and it's no cheap thing to put those to invest in that technology either. But obviously, it's these top guys are believing that it's going to work out for them in the long run.
Absolutely, it's a huge investment, but not without its benefits either. And being able to sell bulls with proven figures rather than as estimated figures is a great asset to the breed, to the industry, not just to one producer.
Sure.
I think it's really important that people do put in that technology there when they're trying to identify the right genetics, and I think it's fantastic. And like Sir Colin Davidson, he's a top breeder, but when you see him not just relying on the fact that he's known as a top breeder and he's got good stock, he's now actually challenging that himself, and I think that's the most exciting thing you can do in the production side. It's great.
And of course, John Elliott at Robertson has been on this podcast talking about the merits of the system that he's installed as well. But certainly wise words there, Willie. I think for all of us to challenge ourselves every day to improve is the way forward. And extremely fascinating, Willie, to hear the stories, and to hope our listener will realise that there is still further to go. And from the likes of people like you and the likes of Harborough, how technology is taking us all forward. And Willie, I wish you well with your health, and I hope that we get to meet up maybe at the Highland Show in the summer or sometime there, and I very much appreciated your time. Thank you.
That'd be brilliant. Thank you very much.
And Jill, again, we'd like to thank Harborough for your sponsorship on Top Lines and Tails, and you've been very instrumental to that, and it's been an excellent episode, and thanks for your time.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you for listening to this week's Top Lines and Tails. And as you heard there, we are, of course, sponsored by Harborough. And if you want any more information about Harborough, please go to their website or find them on Facebook. And whilst on the subject of Facebook, why not tune into our Top Lines and Tails Facebook page, where you can find more information on this and other episodes.